Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Emsi webinar, where we will be talking about understanding the career pathways of your graduates. What we'll cover today, we'll talk a little about why graduate pathways and understanding destinations and understanding career trajectories is such an important thing to understand right now. And I'm delighted that we have Ainslie Bulmer joining us on today's webinar. And Ainslie will tell us why the University of Sydney think this is such an important topic. Then I'll talk a little bit about how we run this analysis and how we can use this data in a few different ways. Before finally, Ainslie will tell us a little bit about why and how the University of Sydney will be using the analysis that Emsi are running for them and how they plan to use that to help them with their work. So here at Emsi, we are a global provider of labour market data, labour market insight, and giving a greater understanding of how the labour market fits together. And the reason that we do this is to make labour markets more connected, more informed, and more successful. We try and achieve that by using our data and our understanding of global labour markets to bring together people who are either in or preparing to enter the labour market, employers who are operating within the labour market and are hiring workers from it, and educational institutions like yourselves who want to provide positive pathways for students and positive information and insights for your students. A very brief history of Emsi. The headlines being here that we have a real burning passion for global labour market insight and improvement, and it's something that we've been doing for more than 15 years now. So then, why is this an important issue? Why is understanding career pathways such a vital thing? Well, firstly, let's briefly consider the reasons why students might invest in higher education. And here we see some of the common reasons that we hear from our university friends about why they think students invest in higher education, and in fact why students have told us and told you guys that they have invested in higher education. And I'm sure there are plenty of other reasons as well that could be appearing on screen. But I think what's definitely true from the work that we've done is that while some of the long-standing reasons why people attend university are still important, both important to students and important to universities, and universities have been very good at talking about some of these things, such as your academic excellence, wider student experience, different modes of study, etc. Some of the other aspects here, such as having links with employers, having positive pathways into jobs, having specific skills for the future, are becoming more and more important to both students at the university preparing to attend the university, as well as, of course, to you guys yourselves as you plan and execute your work. And in fact, that's borne out by some very recent research that we see coming out of the US, the Strata Gallup survey of current university students in the US 2017. And as we see here, just over a third of students strongly agree that they will graduate with the skills they need to be successful in the jobs market and successful in the workplace. So that suggests some concern from existing students of the universities, albeit in the US, that they're going to face a tough time in navigating through the job market and navigating through their career. And that's where, of course, universities come in, and that's where Emsi data can come in to help. Now, at this point, I am going to pass the microphone to Ainslie Bulmer, University of Sydney. And Ainslie, it would be really good to hear your views on why understanding graduate pathways is such an important thing and such an important issue for the University of Sydney right now.
Thanks, Anthony. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks, Ainslie.
Great. No, that was just muted, that's all. Are you there?
Yes, we are. We can hear you right now.
Oh, good. I'm so sorry. I was muted for a while, so I couldn't quite hear when to come in. Just following on from particularly that data that you just showed us, Anthony, the Strata Gallup data, it's particularly instructive for universities such as ours that are offering comprehensive education, particularly around the majors that we offer. So coming to your question about why understanding graduate career trajectories are important, we feel that if we understand student trajectories, we can link our teaching to students' future more effectively. And we'll also be able to articulate to students the range of paths their careers could take in a considerably more evidence-informed way. So there's two big ones, I think.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ainslie. And we will come back to you later in the webinar to hear about how the university plans to understand and use career trajectory analysis just that little bit more.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So now let's turn to some of the content. So how do we analyse graduate pathways and what are the various parts involved in doing so? Now, I'll start with alumni mapping. And what we've done is we have built an alumni database incorporating hundreds of millions of professional profiles from a range of different sources that allow us to understand the pathways taken by graduates by job, location, employer, etc. To understand how those job roles and locations and employers change through their career and have changed, and also to understand the range of formal qualifications they've attained both with your university and perhaps other providers as well, and then seeing how that sits alongside other skills they have picked up outside of formal qualifications. Now we can run this kind of analysis for your university as a whole, or we can focus on particular departments, or we can indeed focus on particular graduate cohorts to track specific years of students or specific departments of students as they've graduated and have moved into the global economy. And a really important factor in all this is the 15 plus years experience that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. So we have an extremely deep understanding of structural labour market data, as well as global job postings data. And those things, coupled with graduate alumni mapping data, can give us that really, really rich insight and really tell us and tell you what's going on. So some examples of what this kind of data and what this kind of insight can start to show us and start to show you as a university. So firstly, here is some data from a large, prestigious US university based out of the city of New York. And the very first high-level finding that these guys were interested in was whereabouts in the US do our graduates end up? A fairly simple starting question. And as we see on screen, in this case, more than 47% of their graduates remain in New York, which was actually something of a surprise to the university that that number was so high. And in fact, a bit of a surprise that some of the other numbers were so low. And that kind of gave them a little bit of a jolt to think about, well, we must remind ourselves of the importance of our local New York economy. And we might want to think about how well we understand the New York economy before we start thinking about some of these other more disparate economies where actually only relatively small numbers of our graduates end up. Next, they wanted to know the most common jobs that alumni have ended up in. And this is just an example of the top 10 from a particular cohort. And perhaps you can guess the next question that they were really interested in, and that was, who are the employers that are employing the graduates? And again, this is just an example here of a particular cohort and where they had ended up. A particular cohort from a particular department, a particular school within their university, and as you can see by the names of the employers there, you can probably guess which type of department this was. And it was really useful intelligence because they had strong relationships with some of these employers, but not so strong relationships with some of the other employers. And this gave them some insight into understanding that really they should spend a little effort in trying to build relationships with those employers who they didn't know that well. So just some high-level examples here of how we can start to get some really unique and interesting trends specific to your university, and then start to think about some more targeted analysis of where graduates end up and what they're doing. Now, just taking a slightly different application now, from a different university, this time in England, and they wanted to know how their departments were stacking up against recruitment needs in their regional economy. So what we are able to do is to map their provision and their courses to relevant occupations in the local, regional, and national economy, look at how many graduates are coming out of those programs, and measure that against recruitment volumes in those related jobs in the relevant areas of the national economy. And in this example, firstly, we identified some areas where they were supplying a decent number of graduates each year, but where there was still high volumes of unmet employer recruitment going on. So potentially an undersupply situation where the university could be confident that there were high volumes of recruitment going on. So there was high demand from employers for graduates from these particular courses, and they could potentially look to ramp up those numbers. Secondly, we looked at some areas where they weren't supplying any graduates at all, but where there was, again, significant recruitment demand, which allowed them, of course, to start thinking about, well, are these accredited courses and accredited areas that we should be considering, or can we do some micro-credentials or some shorter commercial courses to find out what exactly employers in these areas are wanting. And finally, we looked at, excuse me, some areas where they were producing significant amounts of graduates, but where actually the recruitment demand in their local area was very, very small. So potentially an oversupply of graduates in this particular instance. Now, of course, what we're not saying here is that the university should stop delivering these courses. That's not what we do at all. That's not our business. But of course, what this suggests is that they might need to look further afield outside of their regional economy to better understand where employers are recruiting and demanding graduates in these areas. And again, that's where the expertise at Emsi can help, because we can identify where actually there are some areas of demand from employers in these particular disciplines, just in other parts of the national economy that you're not currently focusing on. Now, those examples that we've run through there show us the connection between university graduate supply and routes into the established linear economy. But of course, we all know and we hear a lot about how the world of work is changing, and therefore traditional job definitions and classifications and career pathways don't necessarily hold as firmly as they have in the past, and perhaps things are changing. And therefore, where we like to anchor everything to our global expertise in structural labour market data, because that's very important to learn from what's happened in the past and to learn how the structural labour market all fits together. We understand that an employee is more than an industry code, an employee is more than an occupation code. So we need to understand how people fit together with things like industry codes and occupation codes, and how skill clusters are actually becoming more and more important, and how skills relate to one another across traditional job titles and traditional industries and locations, and how those skills and unique jobs that people are doing all fit together to make up the full jigsaw puzzle. So, for example, this time for a different university, we started to look more into skills and more into skills being demanded by employers and also skills being talked about by graduates in their professional profiles. And what we see on screen right now are the top hard skills that employers were recruiting for last year in occupations relating to computer science. So they're computer science graduates entering the labour market, and this is the kind of skill and the kind of stuff that employers in the region they were interested in are recruiting for right now. And then perhaps just as importantly, what were the cross-cutting skills, sometimes referred to as soft skills, that employers were asking for in this particular region? Again, in occupations related to computer science. So as well as the technical hard skills that we saw on the previous slide, those particular programming languages, for example, what are the other skills that we see, such as here, management, communication, leadership, sales? What are those other cross-cutting skills that graduates from computer science degrees should have to give them the best shot of being attractive to employers in this particular country? So here's some examples that we've run through there, and I'm sure you can imagine there are a range of reasons why universities ask us to run this type of work, both internal and external, and we just see some examples here. So course development, portfolio development, of course, which can be right across the university or might be for particular departments of interest. Understanding those industry and employer needs that we just touched on in the previous slides to help industry connections and industry outreach. Likewise, of course, perhaps the most important part of what you guys do, having that direct communication with students, both existing and potential future students, to help them understand how you're going to work with them to give them the best shot of navigating into and through the labour markets that they are interested in around the world. As well as, of course, outreach to alumni, so your graduates, having an understanding of what those guys have done helps you to have that more positive connection with them. And that wider question of understanding your return on investment and understanding the return on investment that students make, having a greater understanding of how students can and have navigated through the global labour market is a help to answer that question. So to start rounding things out today, I am going to pass the microphone back to Ainslie. And Ainslie, it would be really great to hear some of the ideas that you have at the University of Sydney about how you, in fact, are going to use this kind of analysis to help in what you guys have got going on.
Sure, thanks, Anthony. Actually, all of the typical reasons of use you've just outlined are deeply relevant to us. I suppose principally we plan to make the information as available to students as we can, but also to our careers advisors, our academic staff and advising staff, and to keep it as transparent as possible. We also think that with this targeted trajectory data that you've been discussing, we can encourage discussion within our degree committees and the university community more generally, and ask everyone to reflect on what this means for curriculum and also their teaching and for the structure and form of academic and careers advising. So it's very broad, and the richness of the data that we receive from you and the information that we can draw from that is going to be critical, we think, for the student experience going forward.
Brilliant, thanks, Ainslie. And I think the thing that excites me most about that is you've mentioned there that the kind of breadth and depth of how this can be used. So it's not just an exercise for internal portfolio planning, whilst it might help. It's something that can be put right in front of students, right in front of future students, to help them understand what attending the university means and how it's actually going to help them to navigate through their future career, which is, of course, what we're all trying to do.
Exactly, yes. Well, that's what we're hoping for.
Fabulous. Well, that rounds out the content of today's webinar. Thanks to everyone for listening. A particular thanks again to Ainslie Bulmer from University of Sydney for joining me on today's webinar. It's much appreciated, Ainslie, and thank you.
Pleasure.
Now, I'd love to speak with you all individually about the specific challenges that your university facing and you're facing in your day-to-day work, and to identify where some of the work that I've introduced today might help with that and might fit into your plans. So I'll be reaching out and connecting with you all individually. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening to today's webinar, and I hope to speak soon.